If the council, are you able to hear me? This is Mike in the control room, or nod or wave. We cannot hear any audio coming from the teams right now. We're working on the problem. Okay, I saw you, Councilmember Bryn Mawin. Thank you. Sean doing that? It's not me, is it? Oh, we got. Brad Meyer says we can hear each other. Bryn Mawin is asking if she should wait. Okay, I saw the text message from Brad Meyer. Yes, please wait. We are working on the problem. We still don't have, you're able to hear each other apparently, but we are not able to hear you yet.
So they can hear each other. Right. Yeah, they're able to hear each other, but we can't hear them. They can hear us if we're talking.
I'm here in Chambers. Or I'm hearing myself, I guess. You know, I wonder if it's something as stupid as that plug being pulled out again. asking if they should just go ahead and start and do a recording of Teams. Oh, can one of the or staff speak, please? Are you able to hear me? Any staff? If someone could just speak, please. We're trying to see if we can get the audio. I don't think we're hearing anything. Sean, are they able to start right now? She should be. I see Council President Brinmon speaking, but we don't hear. So, is Sean still on the line? Can, they wanted.
So, Josh texted me saying that Jesse was in here working on something on Friday. Right, it was like yesterday.
Sean, they're asking if they can just go ahead and start recording it on their own.
Can they start recording it on their own, or can you tell them to wait?
Council member Brenwell is asking for someone to call her.
Staff, a few naughty kids doing funny things that wouldn't be so funny if you were a teacher. Okay, council is saying it's council chambers. Maybe they're logged out and logged back in. Okay, so we're working now. I just want to get the go ahead. So, okay. It says the audio device settings had to be fixed in Teams in chambers. So with that, it looks like it's a go. Thanks, folks, for being patient. We are going to get started then. For those recording, I see we've started. So the St. Paul City Council Budget Committee meeting will come to order. We have two departments presenting today, our Parks Department as well as our DSI. We're starting with Parks. We have gotten some advanced materials, and just a reminder, again, for folks who are watching our budget presentation for the first time, or just a reminder for people who forgot, we're making an effort to get through all of our major departments ahead of the council's required set of the max levy or the levy limit, which will be taking place on the 16th of September. So it's an effort to get an overview, not to do the deep dive that we will do later in the budget season, but just anything that's, we want to make sure that we're aware of before we put our levy limit down. Right now, the mayor's proposed levy is 0.0. And I haven't sensed that there's a real appetite to go up from that, given the pandemic and the struggles that folks are facing in our community, which means this is definitely a cut budget. So should we move forward with 0% levy limit, then the conversations from mid-September through the end of the budget year will be, if we're adding something, what needs to be cut to take its place, or what other funding can we come up with to pay for those priorities. So we will hear today, again, a little bit of a slower start because we had some technical issues. So thanks for standing by. We'll start with our Parks Department. We'll keep you on track, probably to wrap up a little bit before 11, so that we have time to hear from DSI. But with that, I see Brad Meyer, my comm on the camera for Parks Department. I think we'll start with Mr. Hom.
Good morning, everyone. I'll start with a quick microphone check, if I can get a nod to make sure people can hear me. Thank you. I'm Mike Hom. I'm the Director of the Department of Parks and Recreation. As Council President Brenmoen noted, with me is Brad Meyer, who is our Chief Financial Officer. What he will be, I know you all do this all the time. How we're setting this up is Mr. Meyer, with backup from Ms. Houston, is going to drive the PowerPoint presentation. So we'll do our best in combination to answer whatever questions you have and go through these materials. As noted, in addition to the PowerPoint presentation, we did provide some supplemental materials, I think 3 pages on the Awakenings program and 1 additional page on our donation program at Como Park Zoo and Conservatory. And I'm told that those are available, tagged to the agenda for this meeting. So those are available, should be available to the council members and to the public that has access to that agenda. So with that, we'll dive right in. This will serve as the first of 2 budget meetings that we have scheduled. This one focused on general fund impacts for 2021. We're scheduled to be back in 2 weeks to provide a status update on 2020 budget and go into any questions that come up here, and also expand on a few additional items of interest that come up and that we've been tracking, including our urban forestry program and our partnerships and collaborations with St. Paul Public Schools. So I'll focus most of our time on major changes, knowing that we'll be ready to follow up and answer specific questions in 2 weeks. And in addition to today being the day after our community started distance learning in St. Paul Public Schools, and some of the other issues we're dealing with technology-wise, today is also, I'm told by my staff, International Sudoku Day. So let's get right into some numbers. The second slide, which is showing on the screen right now, is our detailed organizational chart that shows all of our various business lines and supporting FTEs, or full-time equivalent employees. Mayor Carter's 2021 proposed budget reduces that FTE total by 23.13. So our total this year was 586. The proposed FTE total for next year is 563. I also want to, while this is up, I know there's questions, although it's not completely linear, to provide some information about how we provide the primary organization and supervision of our staff. So the color-coded boxes there demonstrate the alignment of where our executive team interfaces with our management team and where we're providing our primary support. I also, while the org chart's up, I do want to give a a real thank you to all of our staff represented by these FTEs and the community that we work with. There's a lot of things we've been doing this year as we've been implementing the 2020 budget that don't show up in the line items that are here, as we've done things to support meal service for kids that are at home and do things like supporting and standing up homeless shelters that are in hotels and services of that nature. Moving on to slide 3. This is another bit of background information. This shows a breakdown of the general fund, which we're talking about today, and where we spend those resources by division. Very focused toward our community recreation program and operations and maintenance. Smaller boxes show overhead, and the administration wedge on this chart also includes some big bucket items such as our unemployment insurance, what we do for workers' comp, and our building rents at the City Hall Annex where I'm at right now. Moving forward to our next bit of background information on slide 4. This shows a little bit more breakdown of where we spend the general fund resources by spending categories, pointing out, and this is not a surprise to council members that have heard this presentation before, but the overwhelming majority of spending from the general fund is for personnel, which is over 2/3 of the expenses, and then what I would categorize as overhead, the utilities that we spend for heat, electricity, water, our fleet costs for our vehicles that support personnel, and then major items such as the property insurance and basic supplies to take care of our buildings. Pause there real quick to see if there's any questions on the background information before we press forward into the rest of the information.
I'm not.
All right, pressing forward. Slide 5 talks about what our strategic objectives are and what we've been doing. It goes without saying that COVID-19 has had a major impact on how we put together this 2021 budget proposal. On this slide, you'll see our number one priority is to ensure that the services we're providing in any circumstances are an equitable delivery of service. Access to the programs and services play a vital role in maintaining mental and physical health for all of our residents. Our public realm and direct services have never been more important. As people can't be in inside spaces, people are moving toward outside spaces in the public realm to seek that connection. As I mentioned, we will get more into specifics at our next presentation, but the 2021 budget does invest in a new Awakenings intervention program that targets specific youth in the community for intervention with trained staff and mental health support. We're very excited about this. And that and other community first public safety initiatives have become increasingly important as we deal with inequities and trauma amongst the most vulnerable residents that we work with. Very much illuminated through both COVID-19 and civil unrest that has followed the murder of George Floyd. And then finally, we do want to focus and prioritize our collaboration with internal and external stakeholders, our work with the other city departments, specifically our work downtown with the Downtown Alliance and the business community, and our nonprofit partners at Como Friends and Great River Passage, and all of our various partners with the Right Track program. Moving on to slide 6. This is a top-level overview of our general fund breakdown. It highlights the significant general fund changes in previous budgets. And we will report out on the 2020 impacts in our next presentation. Slide 7 does the same top-level overview, but this is a summary of what we are anticipating for 2021 and what is proposed in the 2021 budget. We will dig into more detail for each of these items on PowerPoint slides 9 through 13. The overall net reduction to the department is that bottom line number of $885,000. That includes spending reductions in excess of $1 million and a revenue decrease that we're anticipating of $124,000 of revenue. For spending, there's a spending reduction of just over $1 million. The majority of that, all but $34,000, is for personnel, salaries, and fringe benefits, and that's the 23.13 full-time equivalent employees that I referenced earlier. $34,000 of spending reduction is in the form of some non-personnel spending. Continuing with the overview, slide 8 goes into impacted positions. This is a total of the full-time equivalent employees that add up to the 23.13 that I've referenced. The impacts are focused in titles that are either seasonal or were currently vacant and tied to supporting services that have been proposed to eliminate it or do differently. And we'll try to cover where those fall in subsequent slides. So with that, I think we're ready to get into the detail for the specific major items for 2021, starting with our aquatics program. This slide highlights changes to our aquatics program, budgeted to result in a net savings of $426,000. The major item, first at top level, I know there were significant changes to the aquatics program. This year, we did not open the seasonal pools at Como and Highland this year. At the top level, this budget assumes we're going to restore services and be able to be at the outdoor pools next year, but make other type of adjustments. The major adjustments are in the form of doing our concession services differently. Prior to this year and previous seasons, we self-performed concession services. We're looking to partner with concessions contractors to have a partner provide concession services. The public will still see concession services. They'll just be provided by a service partner and not in the same way it was done previously. We expect, in addition to budget savings, that our pool customers will see improved service conditions and better consistency across those product lines as we work with partners that have more expertise and more bench strength in the area of concessions. The other changes talk about business hours, where the Great River Water Park, which is the indoor pool at Oxford Community Center, would close during the summer months when the outdoor pools at Como and Highland are open and when Phelan Beach is available. And then at the summer facilities, we would consolidate our operating hours, and we will primarily be open from around a little bit before noon until 7 p.m. where we'll be focusing on the open swim programs and lesson programs. And right now, the forecast is we'd be eliminating a lot of the lap swim and the water aerobics type programs.
Mr. Hahn, before you move on, I do want to ask a question about that last piece. My limited experience at lap swim at the outdoor pools is that there's literally a skeleton staff during those kind of adults only times. How much of the savings is going to be coming out of this particular segment? And I'm asking just because that is the place where we serve adults with disabilities. The water aerobics is very unique in the city, and I realize we're looking for under couch cushions here, but the time when we have lots and lots of staff on is when it's an open swim and there's people on all of the different programming areas, and in this case, there's really limited staff. So what is the the staff impact of just reducing those seasonal facilities, taking out that morning kind of adult-oriented programming?
Yes, Council President Brenmo and council members, we can follow up with the specific information on where we're capturing savings for those items. I don't have that information right in front of me. You are correct in general that it's not terribly staff intensive, but those are also times when we're not collecting a lot of revenue. So you're looking at kind of a net impact versus a strictly spending impact, but we'll follow up with that information. Overall, creating those changes, we'll also be able to forecast how many total staff we'll need for these positions, but we will follow up with that information.
All right, and Ms. Naker, was your question answered? I saw your hand up and then down. Down?
It was exactly your question, just what's the line item changes for both of those savings.
Okay.
So thanks.
Okay.
All right. Appreciate that question. I know Mr. Meyer's taking notes on that in addition to your staff, so we will follow up with that data. Moving on to slide 10, in a similar way, this looks at proposed changes within our recreation programming and maintenance. On the top line, I do want to highlight this. I have heard, I believe I've heard from council members and from the community that we do not want to pursue any additional facility closures, wholesale, or new service partnerships at rec centers. This proposed budget does not include service partnering an entire facility. It does look at other changes within the rec services division that will result in net savings of about $426,000. The major element of this is consolidating and providing more consistent hours across the board at all of the facilities, where we are proposing to adopt a consistent closing time of 8 p.m. at all rec centers. That would respond to what we're seeing in participation trends and use trends, and reduce non-peak business hours at several facilities, and then again focusing on equity. I'll pause there to see if there's any questions on the basic information that's covered on this slide.
Ms. Naker has a question.
Thank you. Dr. Hom, can you speak a bit to what you mean when you say usage trends and how many rec centers currently have hours after 8 p.m. and how late they are open?
Yes, Council President Brenmo and Councilmember Naker. We do have that information, and we can follow up with more detail that's available on this slide prior to the next meeting. Some of the information is listed on the slides where we have specific facilities that are open later, and those are listed. It's a little bit hard to capture on one PowerPoint because we do have services at individual sites that vary seasonally in addition to the basic hours, but we can follow up with that information. We do see that for those shoulder hours, the hours that are later in the evenings, those are we're primarily open for more drop-in or non-scheduled or programmed activity, and our participation varies greatly during those hours, and it does have, as I said, that bit of inequity. But we can follow up with the specific savings and any data on use that we have. My guess is as we lead up to the next meeting.
Thank you. Ms. Prince.
Mr. Hom, I don't recall, you mentioned that the council didn't have any interest in the first bullet point. And I wouldn't want to close any facilities at this point, but I would think that we're always open to new service partnerships because they have been so successful at places like Eastview and Conway. So I would not take that off the table as a way to expand our service to the public. If you catch my drift.
Yeah. Council President Bremno and Council Member Prince, I appreciate the comment, and I will take note of that.
And before you move on, Mr. Hom, I would just say that I appreciate Ms. Prince's comment. In the past, when we have tried to pursue service partnerships at rec centers in the city, there's been a lot of pushback because community members feel that the city is closing the rec center or they're abandoning the rec center. So, but I fully agree that in some cases the service partner is really the right fit in certain areas, and have really brought some rec centers back to life. So I would second that input and just say that, I don't think it's off the table, especially if we're able to communicate well with the community and engage them early on. So it feels like a partnership and an upgrade and an improvement, and not something where we're taking away from a community. I don't believe that just a new service partnership is necessarily a bad thing. I think about Joy to the People or Joy to the People. I mean, there's so many Blackhawks, so many examples around the city where the service partners have just been a fabulous addition to the city's network. So not a blanket statement one way or the other, but just I agree. I am not opposed to considering new service partnerships if that's an improvement.
Well, Council President Bremmo and council members, that again, great feedback. Appreciate that. It kind of builds on. I got a little bit misaligned with my notes on these slides. The information that's on this page that continues on the changes for recreation programming speaks about some of the changes we would anticipate for youth sports, where we are talking about service partnerships, not necessarily for building management, but for transitioning the youth sports for our oldest participants, ages above 8, to working with the community partners that provide services for youth athletics, where we think, especially after taking a pause for a couple operating seasons from providing youth sports, that this would allow us to work with other partners in the community that provide these youth sports services, still use our buildings and our spaces and make them available for the sports, but not be the agency that's managing those activities, performing the registration, assigning the officials, doing the work to provide that service. So we are, as part of this proposed budget, expanding service partnerships with youth sports to transition out of the direct provision of sports for those participants' ages other than the 8U level sports activities.
Well, and I guess, and it looks like Ms. Prince has her hand back up, but I would just say that, just as an example, I know that just from my own children's participation in youth athletics, that the Highland Groveland Recreational Association, HGRA, is really a strong youth sports provider, but it services primarily the western side of the city. And so if you're in a different part of the city, you aren't able to participate in that. So I hope that what you're talking about is looking to share our fields and resources with organizations that have proven to be, strong youth sports providers for kids 8 and older, and can develop a coaching bench and et cetera, to provide those excellent services to kids on the west side and the east side and the north end in a way that we see HGRA performing on the western side of the city. Ms. Prince?
Yeah, that's exactly my concern. On the east side of town, we just don't have those local partnerships to provide that opportunity for team sports. And so I really need to see what we're thinking about these cuts, because obviously the big issue is being able to serve the kids, and that would be, specifically getting into junior high and above. So I really need to see the thinking behind this and the outreach that we're doing to local partners to be available at rec centers in areas of concentrated poverty for kids 8 and older. That is a really big deal for me.
Ms. Naker.
Thanks, Council President. I want to echo those comments that both of my colleagues just made. I just came from a St. Paul Children's Collaborative board meeting where we were talking about a survey of our community partners and what they're seeing that their families need. And families all across the city are saying that they lack things for kids to do outside of school, which has become even more important during the pandemic when so many kids are already so isolated. So I do have concerns about the closures at 8, as well as the elimination of sports programming above age 8. And I guess I'm just wondering, I want to make sure I'm clear on the savings. So it saves us $172,000 to close all centers at 8 p.m. And then it looks like for the youth sports programming, if you take the 212 minus the 109, which is the revenue we would get, we save about $103,000. So am I right that the total savings for both of those changes is about $275,000?
Council President Brenmo and Councilmember Naker, I'm looking at Mr. Meyer to verify that. And like I said, we will follow up with the data, but for the basic information, that looks about right. To the broader point, Council President and council members, I hear you, and it is my priority as well to make sure that we're providing in our community high quality youth athletic experiences across the city that everybody has access to. And it's appreciating that the devil is in the details and how we would go about implementing these things. It's some sports that are available in the community right now. We used to be involved in direct service provision, youth hockey, girls fast pitch softball that we're no longer directly involved in. And this is something we had considered looking at over a period of years, and it's never been a great time to pursue it because of the seasons. But working with some of the great service partners we already have, the Westside Boosters, Parkway Little League, Santa Foundation for Soccer, Joy of the People, Midway Little League, that are very successful and have larger programs than we do to figure out a different way to do this. But I hear you, and we will follow up both with the financial data and it sounds like there's a desire to get more information about what this specifically would look like and how it would be tested.
Yeah, and it looks like Ms. Prince has a follow-up question.
Yeah, to that end, I am aware of one group in particular, which is Eastside Athletics. DeMontre Davis runs the program. It's a traveling basketball team for young people, and he does all the fundraising for it. He has been looking for a place to be situated where he can run his program. So maybe there's an opportunity there for some kind of a service partnership. But I definitely feel like we need to look hard to find those opportunities for a location like Dayton's Bluff or other places in areas of concentrated poverty. So thanks for that. But I want to put that in your on your list of the Eastside Athletics is looking to partner with us.
Council President Brendel and Councilmember Prince, thank you. That's great feedback and builds into kind of the continuation of this on slide 11, which hits the last items that comprise the entire proposed reduction, where we would eliminate some of the winter ice rink maintenance at underused rinks, reducing the total number from 31 to 23. It's a more modest savings number of $44,000. But one where we believe that the use is spreading to other rinks already, and with the unpredictability of the season, focus on quality at a smaller number of sites versus the spread of 31, will be providing the level of service that people will look forward to. And then there is a facility maintenance savings associated with the changes in programming, where we can capture $69,000 worth of savings for 1.25 FTEs. So happy to take more questions, but conscious of time, it sounds like you're looking forward to some follow-up on these items, some data on the specificity, and some information on how we would roll it out.
Yep, that would be great. And as with the other departments we've heard from before, the devil is in the details. And I think, again, just these initial first run through the budget to get a sense of where the cuts are and what that means helps us as we're juggling between the different departments and what our priorities are. And when I see these cuts, I realize, again, the mayor described these as painful. None of these are cuts we want to make. Hopefully, in a lot of cases, there are only 1-year reductions, unless there, as we mentioned earlier, with some of these potential service partners, an opportunity to improve the service at a cost that's less to the city, but an improvement for the community there. And so, we are looking forward to diving in a little deeper when we have the full budget report. So thank you for that follow-up.
Slide 12 focuses on the Como Park Zoo and Conservatory. This is a little bit more on the innovative side, and also builds on some things the council's asked us to look at previously. The changes at Como would have a net budget impact of $361,000. We're going to work with our nonprofit partner, Como Friends, which provides a great deal of operating and capital support at the Zoo and Conservatory, to focus for the next year some of their discretionary gifts more toward to support the operating side to help us bridge this tough budget year. We're also proposing an increase in the voluntary donations for those that are able to chip in a little bit more. We did provide a one-pager with some additional information and data on this that you received at some point yesterday. Still will be allowing free admission or barrier-free to those that that want that or need that, but increasing the suggested donation for those that can, and also the voluntary donation in combination with some things that we were hoping to implement earlier this year, but between some technology and the situation with COVID and being closed, we weren't able to roll it out. We're very excited to be in earnest of rolling out the credit card donation program, and that will allow people a great variety of options in terms of how they donate and the levels that they're donating, being able to name their own donation on the credit card and well exceed what the suggested donation are. Those are, if it was a construction project, I'd say they're shovel ready, but this ready to implement, and we'll begin to see, we'll begin to gather data on this very shortly. But the modeling for all of those things combined, including some staff savings for not needing to count money the same way as we do now, should produce net budget impact of $361,000.
Mr. Hahn, it looks like Ms. Naker has a question.
Thank you, Council President. Director Hom, I'm curious, it looks like from the follow-up information you sent us that the suggested donation is going up by $1 for both adults and children, so making it $4 per adult, $3 per child. We had a very helpful presentation on COMO financing, as you recall, earlier this year, and one of the pieces of information I took away from that is that it costs us about $4.50 per person to run COMO. I'm curious, as long as this is just a suggested donation and no one is under any obligation to pay, and we know that whatever you suggest does tend to sort of set people's expectations as to what they should pay, why would we not make the suggested donation the price that it actually costs us to operate COMO, $4.50 per person or $5 per person, or something that actually gets us close to covering our costs?
Council President Brenmel and Councilmember Naker, those are great questions and really build off the policy discussion you had with COMO campus manager Michelle Furr. It's the balance they're trying to achieve with the donation is promoting free and equitable and allowing the nonprofit to maximize what they can do to raise money on our behalf, dollars that get put back into our facility for capital and operations, and provide that value. I think where there's room there to do, there may be room there to do more. Our hope is with the new dynamic donation program that we're going to be able to give people more options on the digital kiosks and be able to describe what people are supporting with their donation in a more dynamic way and drive the voluntary donation up that way by suggesting that for quick donation dollars of $20 or $50 or more, that this is what that donation buys for folks. So creating those voluntary donation opportunities, doing it in a more dynamic and informative way, it will drive that that per capita up. So we can continue to follow up with that more, but it's pretty good data on what we think we can deliver with this donation point and really achieve this budget proposal. So thank you for that question. And the final set of slides talks about the Community First Public Safety initiative and the Awakenings program. There's two slides that speak to this. The first one provides an overview of what the additional investment of $328,000, where those investments would be made. And again, the Awakenings program aims to provide vulnerable St. Paul youth with mental health support through targeted intervention. Addressing these inequities have been illuminated by what we've been dealing with in the COVID situation, and then additionally the racial injustice work that has been present in our community and really increased since the murder of George Floyd. I did hear, as part of the overall budget presentation, that for a lot of you, you're hearing about the brand of Awakenings for the first time. And so hopefully this presentation will be the first step in correcting that. The overall program does build on what Gwen Peterson had met with most council offices on prior to the COVID situation. And then we've had some smaller conversations in this digital format where we've been rolling that out. So it's the same work under a different brand. Brad, if you can move on to slide 14.
Mr. Hom, Ms. Prince has a question, and thank you for that clarification as well. I think when things are rolled out in our budget presentation under a new brand, it seems like a new program, and so I appreciate that clarification. Ms. Prince.
Mr. Hom, I appreciate the intent behind this program. It's a large dollar amount, so I'm curious about how are the workers trained to do this kind of work? How are we selecting these youth? What rec centers is it going to operate out of? I think there's a lot that has to be answered here. When we look at the cost of our community first public safety efforts, there are some significant metrics for this level of financing. So I'm just wondering when we're going to get those details, and I think it's really critical to understand how those youth workers and Parks and Rec workers are going to be qualified to do that kind of intervention and mental health support. That seems like a pretty lofty goal for people who are paid at those levels. So if I could get a few answers on that.
Council President Bremmel and Councilmember Prince. First of all, absolutely. I think the work is the nature of your question indicates why the importance of this work and why we proposed it as something that's worthy of investment. Biggest picture wise, and we've spoke about it earlier in this meeting, that we do want our community recreation program, our rec center staff, to be available to provide service and make connections with these kids and young people. And in order to do that, we need a resource that's different from what we're currently providing at these sites. And this is what we had pulled together with feedback to roll that out. It was discussions that started prior to COVID. And I hear the overall questions. I know we provided 3 pages of background information just yesterday, and it sounds like this is something that the council wants to hear more about at the next meeting.
Thank you.
That would be accurate.
We have Ms. Jalali and then Ms. Naker.
Thank you. I I similarly am learning and getting information on this. This is also news to me as it is to everybody. I appreciate your acknowledgement of that, and I will be looking for ways to better understand how this fits with other really similar initiatives like community ambassadors. I am personally wholeheartedly very supportive of us making more investments in community first public safety initiatives. I think it's really important as we build out our city strategy that we understand how the programs all talk to each other and that there's kind of a framework and analysis for how the work fits on a spectrum to intervene, support people, and prevent violence. And in lots of conversations where we've tried to build this out and examine each program individually, I do just continue to hear from my counterparts questions about how they all fit together and what each thing means. And I just think we need to develop that vocabulary as a council to support this work. I think it's really important. And so I just want to offer that. And additionally, that it's of course important with any program that we have metrics to make sure it's working. I would love to see the same level of scrutiny applied to our own police department about whether or not they are actually preventing crime and reducing levels of violence, and whether we're getting the results for the significant investment that we put into it, as we do for small early stage programs like this that actually are working and helping people. It's just not something that we're necessarily used to. So I just, as we continue to dig into the budget and as we look forward to SPPD next week and future conversations for this department, I just really believe it's important to start holding that line and having fair standards for much longer, more established departments with significantly more resource and public expectation. So I look forward to learning more about this, and I appreciate the comments made by my counterparts too.
Thank you, Ms. Jalali. Ms. Naker?
Thank you, Council President. And I agree with Councilmember Jalali, absolutely, that we should be asking the same data-driven questions for every department, and I do intend to. With this particular program, and Director Hamm, it sounds like you don't have the detailed information today. I did read over the 3 pages that the department sent beforehand, and they didn't answer a number of questions that I have. I'm really curious about how many kids we're serving, how many young people we're serving, how they're identified. There was a note in the documents that were sent over that said before or after they're involved in the legal system. And so I'm particularly interested in how we identify kids before they're involved. It's unclear to me whether this program is already happening. It seemed like some things were being discussed in the documentation as though they already started occurring, or whether this is truly a new program we're being asked to budget for. It's unclear whether we're actually hiring mental health workers or whether these are Parks and Rec staff or community youth workers, but whether we're hiring separate mental health professionals. So there's a lot of questions that I still have that I think we need to have answered. And I just want to point out that for the $328,000 we're talking about spending on this program, that's more than we were talking about for the expanded hours at our rec centers and for the youth programming for ages 8 and above. So the opportunity cost here is significant. We could actually keep our rec centers open at the hours we're talking about and keep our athletic programming for less than the cost of this budget. So that's why I have so many questions. I don't think this is too small an amount to be asking about, and I really do think we need those questions answered in this budget cycle.
Thanks, Ms. Naker.
Well, Council President Brownmoen, Councilmember Naker, and Jalali, I do appreciate the feedback, and it's as we look to expand this work this year in dealing with the COVID situation and then forecast what we would do next year, we will we'll come back and do our best to answer those questions. It's our staff, I believe the community and this council expects a lot of our community rec programs and our youth employment programs to make these connections. And with this investment, we can do a better job making those connections, bringing on staff and providing training. And it sounds like there's a desire to learn more about the training and do more specific partnerships with contracted services to make those connections. But this is, we have prioritized this. It does come at some trade-off to reach the kids, the young people that are in the highest degree of trauma, and to have that connection with our city services and our recreation program. So I hear you. I saw the questions that came over late yesterday about the program, probably about the same time when we were providing the 3 pages of information, and we will work with the council staff, and where the information where we provide missed the mark or did not answer those questions, we'll have that specific information when we come back in 2 weeks.
And Mr. Hum, thank you for that. And I guess I would just add that there's a lot of support for this type of trauma-based, focused work, and I think that we need to make sure that we're funding it to make sure that their people are properly trained and money and spend money at the same time. I think it is very important, echoing what Ms. Jalali said, that we're, Ms. Peterson is responsible for sort of orchestrating the different pieces of our youth outreach and the Community First Public Safety and tying those things together. Recently, Mr. Tao and I learned that the Sheriff's Department has some type of community ambassador program as well. So we want to make sure that somebody is kind of herding cats and making sure that these things add up and that we're collecting data. I would say that it is even a possible, a conversation that we could have in conjunction with a greater Community First Public Safety update that we are anticipating this fall, as opposed to, consuming the majority of our parks time talking about this particular topic at our next check-in meeting. But I do think that having an understanding of how we're making these decisions, how they're being managed, how they're connected to the other work that's happening in the city would be very helpful. And I guess we can work with you to figure out what's the right place to bring that report back to our colleagues. But I anticipated that this would be the kind of the crux of our conversation today, and it certainly is turning out to be so.
Council President Bremone and council members, we will we'll be prepared for that in 2 weeks, and if there's other forums for that as well. I think it's a great point where this overlaps, and I think the intersection of this work with our other primary work streams, the recreation centers and youth jobs in particular. Last year at this time, we anticipated to have data and make progress based on what we knew at that time and what our programs were. And as we all know, our programs in both areas since February have been greatly different. So it's I know I'll speak for my staff that are working on those programs. They're incredibly proud of what they've been able to do in youth jobs in this work, but also frustrated that it doesn't match the volume that it had previously, and it looks a little bit different. So I get that, and we'll be prepared to come back in 2 weeks in other formats.
Thank you.
I think that wraps up our presentation. I'm sorry I went a little bit longer than your budgeted time. This does show, in addition to the questions that came up at this meeting, that we'll be prepared to provide information on our deferred maintenance, our partnerships with St. Paul Public Schools, and on our forestry program at the next meeting. And we appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. And I don't think you went over our budget time. We started later than we expected, so I appreciate getting through all this material. We are at 10 after 11, so I do want to move on to DSI. If there are any questions we need answered right now, let's do it. Otherwise, we will thank the Parks Department for their first run through their budget presentation and head off to our DSI presentation. Any questions? All right. It looks like we don't have further questions at this time. So thank you, Mr. Meyer, Mr. Hum, for your presentation today. We will look forward to hearing back from you in the coming weeks. Thank you. Okay, so we are moving on. I see Mr. Cervantes is here. I see Mr. Bisido is here. and Mr. Nagelic. So I will, Travis, your picture came right up. So I don't know if that means you're presenting or if Mr. Cervantes is the primary presenter, but it's we appreciate having you here today to give us the quick down and dirty on the DSI's 2021 budget proposal. Welcome.
So I was going to present. It says only meeting organizers and presenters
Okay.
chair.
Okay. So is that Vicki that's talking?
Yep, Vicki.
Okay. I'm going to move you up to a presenter. I sometimes move people down to attendee because it's easier to keep an eye on all of my colleagues when there's less people as presenters. But you should be switched now.
Council President Ricardo Cervantes here.
Here he is.
Do a quick mic check if you can hear me okay.
We gotcha.
All right, great. You've kind of introduced my staff. I just want to recognize Travis and Bistadu and Dan Nagelic, my deputy directors in DSI. Vicki Plaisdall is our financial manager in DSI. And this year we actually included another team member to our budget work group, Angie Weesey, who is also on the call and should be just listening in. Vicki will be driving the PowerPoint for us today. It is my objective today is to provide you with a very high level overview of our general fund, as well as some of the proposals for reductions in our spending, as well as some new fees that we're considering and want to place before you. The way I have the presentation set up is just some general information on how we arrived on this year's proposal for 2021, as well as some detail in regards to how we're going to meet our budgetary requirements, and then lastly some detail around what those impacts will be. And then at the end, I do have an attachment in addition to the PowerPoint slide, which might help clarify and provide a better scope of where those cuts will impact our programming. And so with that, I can begin if you're ready.
You see my screen fine?
I cannot see your screen yet, Vicki. Do you have control?
It shows that I do. Can nobody see my screen?
I'm not seeing it. I do see you as a presenter, however.
Okay, so I'm obviously not doing something right.
I wonder if Holly, you might be able to assist.
Yep, I can pull it up.
Thank you.
Apparently I need a little bit more training on this. Did that do it?
It's up now. I don't know if that's you or Holly.
I think it's me.
Oh, okay, great.
Are we on the screen?
Well, we'll see it. I see below the presentation it says Holly Houston, so I think it's Holly.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
The next slide, Holly, please.
It says it's the 2020.
Yeah, this looks like that's not the presentation.
Okay, I will
The PowerPoint.
fix it. Sorry for the delay.
No problem. It is our goal by the end of this year to become experts at every form and software available to us to do these virtual meetings. We're getting better.
We're getting pretty good. Yeah, sometimes things happen and they just happen. There we go.
On a positive note, if there's anything that comes out of this COVID, it's
So,
certainly
Holly,
these technical.
There's also a set piece that I sent that you could get ready to display when Ricardo asked for it, and that's the org chart. It was a PDF.
Vicki?
Yes.
Okay. So let's we can also use a chat function. for tips on managing the PowerPoint. So
Okay.
let's Ricardo's is presenting. So let's we're on page 1.
Great. So what I have laid out here for you is really the guiding criteria that we had in achieving this proposal. One is obviously we need to achieve the financial and operational goals of the department. We also want to promote DSI's multi-divisional integrated service delivery, and then champion the mayor's pillars and values in this proposal. So our financial goals was to meet our target. That's $1,070,622. And we've done that in a variety of different ways. As you can imagine, we have our largest expense is really around our staffing, and you'll see, those reductions as it relates to staffing. And then recognizing revenue loss due to any staff reductions. And so this is a conversation that DSI has had throughout the budget seasons in regards to, as we eliminate staff, we're also eliminating some opportunities for revenues. Understanding there is kind of a sweet spot in regards to, one, meeting the current budgetary needs, as well as understanding what those reductions mean in regards to revenue and revenue loss. Our operational goals, adjusting staffing levels and assignments to meet the work demands. We've been doing this in a very big way this year. This is something that DSI has done over the last 10 years in creation of the titles that we use in DSI, the DSI Inspectors Series, for example, the Fire Safety Inspectors Series, has allowed for us to be a little more nimble and direct some of our resources in staffing to areas that need more attention. We need to achieve all of our delegated agreements, and so we have some major agreements with the state, with DOLI. Our permitting program is allowed by DOLI. We also have 2 delegated agreements through the State Fire Marshal's office, which allows for us to inspect state projects, public schools, and other public buildings. And then to seek mechanisms to refill positions as the work demands. And so this is an area where we've had conversations with the mayor and OFS, allowing us to look at our revenues and also look at the work demand that is in front of us. Next slide, please. And then championing our multi-divisional integrated service delivery. We want to make sure that we maintain the highest level of quality of work. We also need to maintain the functionality across the various units within DSI. So there are 2 divisions within DSI that are kind of the lifeblood that provide, all of the data entry, the entry point for many of the many of the permits, license applications, and other projects that come through our front door, as well as doing the financial transactions. And so it's really important for us to maintain those systems as we do any considerations for reducing the staff. Many of the divisions rely on each other in regards to generating work. For example, our fire inspection C of O programs often requires permits in the trade area to support them. Work along our vacant building also requires permits, and so the work that's done in one unit has an impact on others. And so we were very mindful in our proposal to ensure that we minimize the amount of disruption from one unit to the next. And then recognizing all staff components, again, in that service delivery, making sure that we have a beginning and end point. Next slide. We also are including our mayor's pillars and values as we came through with our proposal to you, ensuring the health and safety, livability of our communities, economic, physical, and community rebuilding, understanding that under that community first public safety, with some of the damage that was caused with the George Floyd murder and some of the protesting and damage that was done, understanding that that work needs to be rebuilt. And DSI is wearing a couple different hats in that regard, in regards to ensuring that all of our businesses that have been impacted have the ability to understand, what all the executive orders are, restricting, and many of the executive orders that have been passed through our mayor, assisting businesses so that they can rebuild and move forward. Could you go back? I'm sorry. Thank you. And then the economic justice, which I just covered. And then lastly, the lifelong learning. Again, just supporting all those businesses currently that are making the decisions about when and how they're going to reopen. And then all the resources available to them. We've been in that space certainly since April and continue to do that work. And next slide. I wanted to start out by presenting two of our proposals in regards to reducing expenditures and increasing some fees. In the city of St. Paul, DSI has expenditures up to $200,000 covering the cost for the merchant fees. And so we have tens of thousands transactions annually. And what we are proposing here is transferring those costs to the users. There is an equity component to this as well as a financial component that some folks choose to use credit cards in their transactions. We know that there are other departments as well as other government entities that have kind of made that change and attached those additional fees to credit card users. What we would be looking at is offering an electronic check opportunity for individuals at no cost to the user. There's a minimal fee for the city for those transactions, and that would yield us a savings of $130,000 in 2021. In addition to that, we're also looking at increasing our elevator permit fees. That would yield us $82,115. What we had done in our examination is DSI has generally operated under a cost recovery model, looking at areas throughout our service delivery and ensuring that the city is working towards recovering those costs. The $82,000 would not be a total cost recovery for our current expenditures for the program, but it is incremental, moving us closer to that number. We also look at what other cities are charging. There are only two other government entities that have this mandatory program from the state. That's the state itself, as well as the city of Minneapolis. And so our proposed fees would be slightly under the fees in Minneapolis, and they would be about 1.5 times what the state is currently charging for their elevator permit fee. This is a mandatory inspection annually, and so we have a division that puts our effort forward. And then lastly, we're also looking for efficiencies in all of our programming. This is an area where we are still doing some of the entries manually, and so we're relying on kind of our clerical staff to do some of that work. We've automated many of the other processes in our trade area. So the mayor has challenged us to look for efficiencies as we provide this service.
Mr. Cervantes, Ms. Naker has a question, and I just would like to step in and say that the last thing you just said and the merchant service fees are overdue. I'm glad that we're making this step. I think people have become more accustomed to picking up that 3% charge if they want to have the convenience of using their credit card, and I also appreciate the opportunity to do a electronic check if you don't want to pay that fee. And I'm assuming we can also still walk it in old school if people want to, but it gives that option. And I think as folks use PayPal and Venmo and other services, and even just vendors from Etsy and beyond, that has become an expectation. Similarly, with inputting with data entry, the more we can automate it to the end user and less to our staff, the better. I always say if we can buy our own airplane tickets, we should be able to input our license, permit requests online as well. It seems that the one, if we can do the one, we should do them all. So I appreciate that. Ms. Naker did have her hand up.
Thank you, Council President, and thank you, Mr. Cervantes. I'm curious, you mentioned that the elevator permit fee increase will get us closer to cost recovery, but not quite there. I very much support us recovering the costs of the work that we do for on behalf of the clients who are coming to us. So why are we not at cost recovery?
Again, I'll just kind of restate. I think there's about 4 reasons. One is some sensitivity to all businesses and property owners right now that have these elevators, and understanding that they're all struggling with COVID, and rents and an additional fee is going to add, a cost burden to them. Secondly, the mayor has asked us to look at ways that we can be more efficient in delivering this service so that we can reduce the cost. And then we've always operated in kind of an incremental increase to reduce the shock or the sticker shock of these fee increases. And so, that's where we're at today.
Just as a quick follow-up, I appreciate that, and I especially appreciate the sensitivity to business owners' needs right now. I just want to clarify, are we then, in addition to finding efficiencies, are we on track to eventually getting to the point where we are fully recovering our costs? Because I think that's an equity statement, too, to make sure that we are, for the work that we are doing for individual property owners, we are making sure we're covering the cost of that so that the rest of the residents of the city are not paying for that.
Understood, Council President Brenmo and Councilmember Naker. Absolutely, we want to, again, re-examine how we deliver this service and implement some of those automations so that we can, again, cut some of those costs and become closer. The increase we have here was about $80,000 less than what we believe the cost currently is. And so we moved in about half of the direction to bring it kind of whole. And so we're hoping that the next increase will be less than, again, another 50%, which is a substantial increase. Next slide, please. So here's getting into the detail in regards to the remaining portion of our target. The $890,000 are all associated with not filling positions in 2021. And so we have 10 positions laid out here. I'm going to go through them relatively quickly. And then, I think the other document that we have provided, which is the organizational chart, which highlights these positions in their various units, is a lot easier to kind of digest. But in our animal control area, we have a position of a custodial engineer. There's only one of those positions within that division. That division currently is short 2 positions, and so we've been operating short of those 2 positions. And that's going to require that we have some changes in how we deliver service. I think first and foremost is going to be the hours of operation. We're looking at reducing the hours to the public by 1 hour in 2021. We've already begun our response to complaints. Rather than sending an animal control agent out on a low-level nuisance type violation, we're sending a letter to the pet owner. And most of those are dogs barking. And so we've reduced the need for them to go out there on the first complaint, hoping that the letter will put the owner of the pet on notice. And then if there's subsequent complaints, we'll go out there. Would also be reducing some of the other inspections to the initial inspection, and there wouldn't be ongoing inspections. in regards to complying with those animal control regulations around keeping animals. Our code inspector series, the DSI Inspector 1 and the DSI Inspector 2, you may be familiar with. This is all of the nuisance work and complaints, as well as some of the proactive work that we've been doing in the city. The difference between the two is really just the complexity of the work within this section. These are individuals that would be responding to tall grass, snow, walks, inoperative vehicles, trash. They would also respond to owner-occupied deficiencies on exterior of properties, as well as responding to nuisance conditions on commercial properties. The DSI-1 works primarily in the environmental. The DSI-2 works primarily on the structures as well as the interior. So some of those gross unsanitary and other deficiencies in homeowner properties would be covered by the 2. Primarily, we would be looking at 2 things, a reduction in the overall volume or output within this unit, as well as the time it takes for us to close out each one of the case. One last thing is, we've worked extremely hard to become more efficient in this area. We increased the number of proactive inspections that we do. If we get a complaint, for example, on one block, we would often check the record to determine whether or not similar conditions on that block had orders open or not, and we would then proactively, issue orders to multiple properties with similar conditions. That is going to, the reduction in staff here will reduce our ability to do that at the same level we're doing currently. In our communications unit, we have a customer service representative. That individual responds to, the phone calls, the emails. The majority of those communications have to do with complaints, but they also service informational calls that come in that get transferred throughout the city to various departments depending on what it is they're looking for. This group also does some of the data entry and also does some of the research for some of our other units, and so they support us in a variety of different ways. What I understand currently is that we're operating at record level of phone calls and emails. And again, in 2020, we've been operating with 2.5 vacancies, which has been extremely challenging. We've augmented the staffing in this area with other staff from other areas to support us until we were able to hire somebody. So moving forward into 2021, again, we would expect that there would be an increase in the response time on the phone calls, as well as a delay in regards to some of the data entry that supports the other units. Next slide, please. Our fire safety program, this is a proactive program in part. What we're looking at is the built environment, both residential and commercial. We have frequencies of inspections based on the condition of the property. By losing 2 fire safety inspectors, again, the reduction would be in the productivity. In past years, in good, fully staffed years, our numbers come in at about 4,500 fire CFOs. We've been operating under that performance with the reduction that we've had. We've had both illnesses as well as military leave in this section, which has reduced our overall numbers for this year. As we look at how we manage through COVID, ensuring people's health and safety, the fire safety program has been intact and has been doing its work, but has been kind of keeping up with their ability to get into buildings and, again, being very sensitive of individuals that may be sick or showing symptoms, and again, keeping our staff safe. Going into next year, we would expect that there would be a considerable decrease in the number of C of Os. Again, this is an area that we worked very hard over the last several years to increase the number of C of Os annually. And so we're going to see an increase and a slide on the number of C of Os on their frequency and the number of months between their scheduled inspection and when we actually get to that inspection. In our clerical support area, this is the area that supports our front counter, as well as all the applications that come in for business licensing, permits, mail-ins, as well as some of the online entries. We've moved more into the online area in regards to our construction trades area. And so we'll continue to work in that area to allow for a better portal experience with our customers, as well as making it easier for folks to do their business with DSI online. So we are operating, we have a target goal of turning permits and applications around within 2 days. We're currently operating at about 2.7, I think was the last number we had, and we're out about on some of these applications currently out about 7 days. So depending on which line of business it is, we're turning those around as quickly as possible. And then lastly, in our zoning area, and I'll say that the first position listed here was a position that was created last year. This was a contingency position, understanding that we're entering the realm of many large development projects, Ford being one of them, Allianz Field being another. There are about 4 others on our list. The intent was to allow for the city to have more capacity in this area to look for opportunities for shared green infrastructure with a water resource in our stormwater plans. What we are doing currently is we do have one individual who's working in this area, providing that leadership as well as executing opportunities. For example, at the Ford site, at the Hidden Falls Headwater, executing those type of opportunities. It just means that we're going to have a little less resource in this area moving into 2021. We would expect that as business continues, this may be one of those positions that we may advocate for an adjustment in our budget to support this work, depending on, again, the economy and the strong development work happening in our city. We also have a senior city planner. This position primarily does the work around our site plan, again, for all projects of a certain size or a change of use. We're currently augmenting our site plan staff downstairs. This is an area that's extremely challenging for us. It takes years in order for our staff to gain the level and depth of knowledge in order to ensure that those reviews happen swiftly but more importantly, accurately. And so we do have some of our senior staff providing that leadership and guidance and training for our newer staff operating in this area. But not having a senior city planner into 2021 means there will be some delays in regards to those site plan turnaround times. And then lastly, the DSI Inspector 2 in our zoning area supports other services, letters regarding zoning for developers and for sales, as well as some of the lower level articulation and other reviews, driveways, and what I would say are simple site plan reviews in order for folks to move forward with their project. Next slide, please. So Holly, if you could pull up the organizational chart, that'll kind of provide the spread of these positions throughout the organization. You know, I should say that, you know, as we use the criteria in our development of our proposed budget, you know, it was really important for us to maintain service across all of our business lines, but specifically with a focus on development and understanding that there's still, you know, some great opportunities in St. Paul for development and support the, you know, immediate and future jobs, promote safety, and of course, all of this will contribute to our tax base and will support our budget going forward. So in this additional slide, you can see where the positions are located within DSI. Again, I wanted to provide this to provide you some level of scope in the area of where the reductions are happening. Again, on the farthest left side of the organizational chart is our code enforcement. And so code, I would say that, you know, we've made multiple changes in code over the years. Again, the 1 and the 2 position over there means that, you know, some of those simple response to complaints will just take a little bit longer. We still have staffing both on the east and west side. Our other divisions within code enforcement, another one to be mindful of is the vacant building program, which is administered through code. You know, we had some fears that there may be increases in the number of vacant buildings. We've been on a downward trajectory. I was told today that we're at about 422 vacant buildings. So that number continues to go down even this year. But we want to be mindful that, you know, we may see some increases as a result of the economic impacts of COVID, unemployment, and, you know, non-payment of rent.
Mr. Cervantes, before you talk forward, I just want to check in and ask, what is that number that we, I think that's been thrown around before, that a city of our size could expect to have vacant buildings at? About 300, 200, 400? Are we about at that number now?
Yeah, Council President Brenmoen, yeah, that number that I had heard, you know, for a city of our size, we could expect somewhere between 350 and 400. Right. And the fact that we're nearly at 400 would, you know, support the fact that in regular times and normal times, right, we might achieve a 350. That because of the life cycle of our housing in the city comes to a certain point, and then the condition of individuals owning those properties, you know, kind of enters them in this realm. I should say also that there are 3 different categories of vacant buildings. And the, you know, vacant building 1 category is the largest category and the easiest to move out of. And so we do see quite a bit of movement in and out of that vacant building category.
All right. And I think that when you come back for the deeper dive, some of the, you've mentioned a few potential service impacts or inspection response times, and maybe we can delve into it a bit. We've been making good progress on catching up with our C of O inspections, and I just want to, I understand, you know, why we're keeping vacant positions open, but also would be helpful to understand how is this a setback for us? How much of a setback is it? Are there, you know, have we caught up to an extent where this is something that we can manage for a year? So I think, and you don't need to answer that right now, but I think that would be to understand more about beyond just like, yes, there'll be an impact. This is the impact. I think similarly, I'm curious about how we're going to be absorbing the water resource coordinator and city planner for Ford, you know, and what is the impact and the cost, opportunity cost with DSI. So just if we can work a little bit deeper into, well, what does that mean? And also how we're communicating with our constituents about delays so that I think if people are expecting, like I read online, it's like, oh, I got my driver's license. They said it was going to be 4 weeks and it only took 3.5. They're happy because it came at the time that they were told, but they were communicated with on the upfront that it would take a little longer. So just making sure that anticipating these delays, that we're managing them in our communications to our end users as well.
I've got notes on those comments, President Brenmoen, and so when we come back, we can delve deeper into each one of those areas.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yep. The other areas of interest you can see on the far right side, we have the information and complaint area. Again, this is an area that we've managed through COVID with several vacancies and realized the volume increase. There's been quite a bit of activity about folks just understanding kind of what's happening in the city, what's happening in DSI. How do I submit my applications? To what extent are you open? In addition to coordinating, those individual requests with either services in other departments, or the majority of those are services within our own department, scheduling, inspections, and things like that. And so we are going to be experiencing one loss there. Also, in our clerical support, we understand that our development area has been strong. Surprisingly, throughout COVID, it's one of the areas within DSI, again, understanding that we want development to take place, we want to make improvements, we want to support investment, and we want businesses to reopen in our city. And so we've kind of gone into this with that mindset in supporting this work in our city. But given the fact that there are other, what I think are great opportunities in the city for development, it is an area that, again, this is one of the other areas that we may need to reconsider, again, supporting if revenue support, adding additional staff. This is kind of another key area. These are the folks that are doing that initial entry of applications, as well as all the transactions that support that work. And then in our zoning area, you can see that there are actually 3 different positions there. One of those was a contingency. Actually, 2 of those were contingency in last year's budget, meaning that we weren't able to hire those in 2020. Again, those would be considerations, again, if there's opportunity for us in regards to higher revenues than expected. Then the DSI Inspector 2 would, again, just be a reduction in that specific area of some of the low-level work that's happening in our zoning. And then lastly is one in animal control. And animal control over the 10 years that I've been here has also been reduced. Again, to the council president's statement about kind of what are the impacts and why in these particular areas. And some of that does have to do with the demand that we're experiencing and understanding that we want to meet the demand in front of us, but it's also having to do with delegated agreements and responsibility. And so in areas where we've made some of these adjustments, we do not have an obligation to the state, but we can talk more about that when I return in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
That concludes my presentation. I understood that you were looking for brevity, and I hope you have the basic information that you need, and certainly we have your comments. I can bring some more information back specific. We can bring some of our metrics back in regards to what our estimates are, what is the real impact on some of these service lines. So you have an idea, and then also some of our communications. We've gotten much better, I'd say, over COVID and, pushing out blasts of information to our users in regards to, our offices are open. Here's how you can do business. Give us a call. We're now accepting applications online. I should also say that, our technology endeavors, our electronic plan review continues to get enhanced. We just added this last week the function for our fire safety inspection reviews. So we now have mandatory, our larger site plan reviews can all be done electronically. Our building permits of a certain size, both residential and commercial, can be done online. And now we're getting into the smaller trade areas to support that same online, and we'll continue to work to add all of those different trade lines into our electronic plan review. And then lastly, we did maintain a portion of our budget to enhance our portal for the end of the year. We want to make sure that as we're enhancing, those online services, that the experiences, are going without a hitch. We've actually been able to eliminate some of those problematic glitches that we had, and hoping to provide a much better experience for our customer.
Great, thank you very much. The other piece, we had recently had a presentation about folks experiencing homelessness and the work that the city is doing, and I think as part of the follow-up presentation, understanding recognizing that a lot of that work is being funded through CARES money, but also being performed with under the leadership of DSI. In partnership with other departments, and understanding the costs of that, and also how it impacts the the org chart and the amount of staff that we have to do our other priorities as well. And just getting a clear understanding of that, I think, would be a helpful when you're back in a few weeks. Are there other questions for Mr. Cervantes? Okay, it looks like we don't have questions at this time. And again, sorry, it's when we do these first run-throughs, they're very brief, and but just wanting to make sure that we have a chance to look through our big departments, major cuts before we set our levy limit. So we do appreciate the quick overview, and gives us an opportunity to dive into the things that we want to learn more about at the extended meeting. So we appreciate that. I think we end up getting thorough answers to our questions then when we come back together. So we appreciate that. If you have any closing thoughts, we'll go to that. And otherwise, it looks like my colleagues don't have further questions at this time.
Just closing thoughts is that, we're really thoughtful about our presentation and our budget submittal this year, understanding that, DSI provides a wide range of services protecting people's health and safety. And we intend on continuing that into 2021. And we've made those adjustments, again, based on some of the demand, based on our responsibilities under our delegated agreements, as well as impacts on revenues and the budget. So again, I want to thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. All right, we will hear more from DSI in a few weeks. So that brings us to the end of our scheduled presentations. Ms. Houston, do you have any closing thoughts for the council?
Council President Brendmoen, council members, next week before us, we'll hear from the remaining general fund departments, the police department, the Office of Technology and Communications, and the HERO department. So far, we have received about 71 budget survey responses, and so I will be summarizing that information for you to have in preparation of the levy limit vote. However, we will continue to keep that survey open and be pulling that data and feedback throughout the budget cycle. We don't adopt a budget until December. So thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. And that's a big increase from last week with the survey input, I guess, melding it together with the public hearing input. So that's great to hear. Thanks to my colleagues who promoted the survey as well. All right, so it looks like we are wrapped here for today. We meet again later, but for now we are adjourned. Farewell. Thank you.